In this lab, we're going to model the carbon cycle, which is a type of biogeochemical cycle. What that means is that it's a way for certain chemicals like water or carbon to move through the biosphere or the geosphere. Carbon is stored in different storage areas. Storage areas is a term for the places that we find carbon or whatever we're talking about. Different models will break down the storage areas in different ways. For the carbon cycle in our model today, we'll use 11 storage areas that includes things like soil deep inside the earth, atmosphere, and so on. Although carbon is more plentiful in other places, we're going to start in terrestrial producers because it's easy for a lot of us to visualize. Terrestrial means land, and hopefully you already know that producers are organisms that can make their own food. So terrestrial producers would be things like trees or grass that do photosynthesis. I'm going to write this down on my paper for my starting location. You should not write it down because this is just an example. In a minute, you're going to go back to lab and you're going to write down whatever is at the lab table at that station that's listed there as your starting location. A lot of you will probably start at the same location as your friends, but each of you will get your own die and you're going to follow your own pathway. So although you may start with friends, you should be moving individually and your paper should not be the same because this is an individual activity. Now that I've recorded the starting location, I'm going to roll the die. I rolled a 6. So on my paper, I'm going to write the process that carbon is going to move to a different storage area. You can identify this on the lab because it will be written in purple and bolded. So rolling a 5 or a 6 results in predation. I'll write that in the box. It says terrestrial consumers eat producers and pass carbon through the community as food. So predation is just eating. The words in red, like food, show what carbon form is in. So the food would be whatever is being eaten. For example, the leaves from a tree that are being eaten by a deer. A terrestrial consumer means land organism that's going to consume another organism for energy, such as a deer that would eat the leaves of a tree. So I write terrestrial consumer on the line. So now I'm going to go and find the lab table that has the information for terrestrial consumers. Once I get there, I'm going to roll my die again. If I'd rolled a 1 or a 2, I'd be at that first one, but I didn't. I rolled a 5, so I'm at predation again. Carbon is passed through the food chain when one organism eats another. Record, stay here at terrestrial consumers, and roll again. So notice the same process as our last turn is predation, but this is a different lab station from a different roll of dice, so I need to list it again. The carbon form in red is listed as food chain, so that might mean that the animal is being eaten by another animal. So for example, the wolf might eat a deer, passing the carbon from the deer to the wolf. Since the wolf is also an animal that lives on land, or a terrestrial consumer, I didn't move to a different station. I'm still at terrestrial consumer, and I'll record that on the line. I've written the word terrestrial a bunch of times, and you might be tempted to skip that part, but please don't. It's important that I include that because the processes can be a little different when they're on land versus in the water, which aquatic is the term we're using. Aquatic consumers is a different station. It's possible for carbon to pass from land to water or vice versa, but that complicates things more, so for simplicity, we'll keep them separate. Since my next location is the location that I'm already at, I don't need to go anywhere else. I'm going to stay here and roll again. This time I roll a 4. So a 3 or 4 has decomposition as a process, which again I know because it's in purple. So I'll write that down on the line. I'll write decomposition for process. It says dead consumers are broken down by bacteria and other decomposers released into the soil. So in our example, we started with a leaf, and maybe a deer ate the leaf and a wolf ate that. And now the wolf has died, and anything that hasn't been eaten by other scavengers and other consumers gets broken down and put back in the soil. Since soil is in blue, I know that that's my next storage area, and I write that in the box for next location. Then I take my die and find the table that has a sign for soil. I get there, I roll my die. This time I happen to get a 1, and it happens to be decomposition again. So I write that on the line. It seems weird because I'm writing the same thing twice, but it's a different location, and the way carbon moves through the biosphere is a little different. I make sure to read the description. Decomposers in the soil take carbon from the detritus, the debris from once living material in the soil. that's like the brown mush of the soil, and release the carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere. Atmosphere is blue and underlined, so I know that that's my next location, and I'm going to write that in the box for storage area. Now I'm going to move to the station that has the sign for atmosphere and keep going in the same manner. I need to fill out my entire chart. Doing 36 moves seems like a lot, but I promise you, once you get the hang of it, it goes really fast, and it really only scratches the surface of the way carbon can move around in the biosphere. Quick side note, occasionally when completing this lab, students will bounce back and forth between the same few things over and over again, or they'll even stay at the same station for a whole bunch of rolls consecutively. That actually is really common because carbon does end up staying in certain places for a really long time, or in certain parts of the carbon cycle for a really long time. But that doesn't give you, as a student, a good overview of the carbon cycle. So if you get stuck doing the same thing for a few rows, just pretend you rolled a different number so you can get off that rut. Once you've completed the table, the next step is for you to make a physical model or a diagram of the carbon cycle. Instructions for that are in another video.